This is Keep Up. I'm your host, Cynthia Dill. It's Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. I'm in my Cape Elizabeth studio 2 days before Thanksgiving. I think it's the nation's 163rd Thanksgiving. It became a legal holiday in the 1800s, but of course, the very first Thanksgiving was in, I think, what was it, 1621? The Wampanoags and the English colonists enjoyed the feast. Well, I'm ready. I've been baking my baking my brains out, and I'm prepared, and I hope you are too. And I wanted to do a show before we take off for the holiday weekend, and I want to talk about what I'm grateful for, just a few things, and then talk a little bit more about what I'm not grateful for, uh, and and then talk a little bit about maybe why I'm Scrooge and not Santa, and trans Santa. That's what I'm gonna finish the show up with, a story about trans Santa. So first, what I'm grateful for, well, I'm grateful that I came in first place in a local turkey trot this past Saturday, running a speedy 27-minute, 28 seconds for a 5K. So that put me at an 8:50 pace and placed first in my age category. Boom. So I'm grateful for my good health and knock on wood. I hope you and yours are healthy. And I am grateful for Riley Gaines. I'm grateful, really grateful for Riley Gaines. I had the pleasure of attending the Riley Gaines event in Maine on this past Saturday, and it was a kind of a who's who of Republican politics that took place at the Calvary Church in Westbrook. So it was kind of interesting because even though it was, clearly a political event, it was in support of a ballot question to get an act to separate athletic facilities on the basis of sex on the ballot, the so-called, Protect Girls Sports in Maine citizen ballot initiative. So it's a political process, but there was a fundraiser taking place at this church. And so leading up to the speaker, the keynote, Riley Gaines, this really fantastic, powerful young woman. I'm more impressed now having seen her in person than I was even having heard about her courageous story as a swimmer and just taking on gender ideology. And so we all went to see her, but in anticipation of that, or on the agenda, unbeknownst to the audience, were two kind of fire and brimstone preachers, which was I hadn't heard that kind of um, sermon in a bit, so that was kind of interesting. But before the program, when Riley Gaines spoke, there was a lot of mingling on the first floor, so I had fun talking to several candidates running for governor. I did some interviews, which I enjoyed very much. They were good interviews. It's just the audio is terrible. Otherwise, I'd refer you to listen to them on the channel. I actually took down the one with Jim Libby and Ben Midgley, but both men very impressive. Ben Midgley in particular, I met in line. He was with his wife Sonia, and he told me, the elevator pitch, but more because it was a long line and we were waiting. So his rags to riches story is very impressive. I mean, he grew up poor, was on food stamps. He said, I don't think he finished college. I don't think he went, but he started Planet Fitness and then another, wildly successful franchise. So he's a businessman, similar, to Governor LePage. Although I don't know if his childhood is that horrific, but so he's running because he wants to give back. He sees the state that raised him and, afforded him the opportunity to succeed so well and to raise his family. He wants to fix things in Augusta. I also ran into Jim Libby, who was, I guess, maybe even still does, youth athletics. So all of these guys, I asked them, well, what are you doing here? And Ben Midgley, for instance, said, well, he has kids. He really believes boys shouldn't play in girls' sports. Uh, Jim Libby was a coach, so he had a different kind of unique perspective on it. I talked to Governor LePage, who, of course, is not running for governor. He's running for Congress in Maine's 2nd congressional district, and he looked great, I must say. He's very trim and spry and, energetic, very positive. He had a a similar message. He doesn't believe boys should play on girls' sports teams. He connected it to his own family, his children, his deep and abiding support for Title IX. And of course, he's running for a national race and says that, even though this is a state law, he thinks it's going to be a national. So I had a nice long talk with Garrett Mason, who's considering running again for governor. He is in a public relations firm now, and was there, yucking it up. I mean, this was really retail politics at its best. I ran into my now good friend David Jones again, sporting another fabulous jacket, really working the room, doing a lot of handshaking, a lot of baby kissing, a lot of pats on the back, a lot of pats on the shoulder, a lot of big smiles, good smiles. So he's really working the room, and it was great, and I'm just so grateful for Riley Gaines. I mean, if you haven't heard her story, you really need to take some time and learn it because she was at the top of her field in swimming, in collegiate swimming for the NCAA, and, in the last year of her college career, suddenly on the lists of her competitors appears this name, Leah Thomas, who nobody had ever heard about. Well, long story short, Leah Thomas had been Will Thomas, placing in like 500th place. And now all of a sudden he became identified as Leah Thomas, although bear in mind, no surgery, right? So he's still fully intact, as they say. And he bursts on the scene in the locker room as well as in the pool, winning most races by full body length. However, in this one particular race, Leah Thomas and Riley Gaines had an exact tie, if you can believe it. So they both came in 4th place. I think that's right. Or they both came in, but there was a tie, but the trophy went to the trans, man, Leah, because I don't know why. I don't know why, but it was just such an injustice. And Riley Gaines, to her credit, she has she's been doing retail politicking, helping just get the word out that this is unfair, that it discriminates against women and girls, and it's embedded into our culture now. It's like it's the gender ideology cult has been very powerful, and we're slowly seeing cracks in the grip that it has on our society. But thankfully, Riley Gaines is out there, and she was really good on her feet. She was quite um, witty and personable, and even though she had quite short stature, just very big and confident presence. So I'm grateful for people like Riley Gaines. And, and this just pivots now to what I'm not grateful for. Well, no, Riley Gaines was there at this event in support for this petition to protect girls' sports in Maine, which I'm working on as well. And the petition is a citizen initiative to put a law on the books that would simply say in public schools, athletic teams and facilities are divided on the basis of sex, male, female, and there's co-ed. And sex is defined as someone's birth, recorded sex on their birth certificate, right? Biological sex recorded on your birth certificate. It's pretty simple, right? It's comes every student who's registered in public schools has submitted this information already. It's available. It's not an invasion of anybody's privacy to know what their sex is, and this just kind of corrects a huge mistake that Maine made in 2019 and 2021. And this is so now we're gonna pivot to what I'm not grateful for, and what I'm not grateful for are the people who actually pushed these laws through in 2019 and 2021 without anybody knowing it in a very deceptive way. So, especially the law that made gender identity a protected status in education and therefore allowing boys in Maine to play on girls' sports teams and to enter girls' locker rooms and girls' bathrooms. That law was passed in 2021. You remember what else was going on in 2021? Yeah, we were in COVID lockdown. I think the legislators were meeting online. We can ask Laurel Libby. But these laws slipped through under the guise of clarifying the Maine Human Rights Act. And the Maine Human Rights Act wasn't just clarified, there was a major earthquake in the law. I mean, women and girls were essentially erased because you can't have simultaneously protections on the basis of sex and gender identity laws that say a man can declare himself to identify as a woman and have access to women's spaces and teams and facilities just because he says so. There's no medical requirement, there's no disability, there's no, you know, um, diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Obviously, there's no surgery required. So while a lot of people think, oh, trans men are, these people who have gone on this journey and found themselves. Well, gender identity laws says you can just have a feeling inside one day that you might want to go into that locker room and stare at naked women. And you can just tell the person who's in charge, I identify as a woman. And they have no recourse. And that's because gender identity was added to the law in 2019 first, and then into the schools in 2021. So in walks to this conversation right now, Gia Drew. Okay. He is a man who identifies as a trans woman, a trans identified man. He wants me to call her she. He wants me to call him she. And, up until a little while ago, I would have considered that. But no, 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 no. Now, because now we're in this campaign to actually protect women and girls. And we can see really what's going on here because there's misrepresentations and distortions already in the news by all of these organizations. There's this conspiracy of nonprofits in Maine, all linked by the same powerful group that includes, Gia Drew and like numerous, members of the Royal Alphabet Club. And, Gia Drew's response to this petition to protect girls' sports in Maine as the executive director of Equality Maine was essentially to say a lie, which says, Gia Drew, I'm quoting the Maine Morning Star, Gia Drew, executive director of Equality Maine, said the group is trying to, quote, overturn 20 years of law here in the state of Maine, where trans people, especially kids, have been protected from discrimination in schools. Okay, it really bothers me that the news and the society in Maine has not questioned um, the appropriateness of this person to be the protector of children's rights because this person, I think if you know anything about autogynephilia, it's a phenomena where a male's propensity to be sexually aroused by the thought or image of him being female. So you just go to Gia Drew's Twitter account, okay? She was goth Barbie, and now I think she's now he is uh I wrote it down. Was goth girl. Now it's gothic Barbie. And, there's on the one hand a post about Gia Drew's professional work as the executive director of Equality Maine up at the State House for Youth Lobby Day. So this person is up advocating for kids. And then at night in the graveyard, like acting out some weird kinky fetish. And if you go to Twitter, there's images of this person kind of imagine a downward dog position, but the backside, all you can see is um, fishnet tights over very tatted up legs with all curvy things heading towards the direction of this person's rear end and a thong and high, like what I would call like fuck me boots, those kinds of like, they almost look like warrior boots, but they're up and they've got a lot of laces and they've got a heel. So that's one image. And then there's, and there's a quote that says, top and bottom views of my leather and lace fit for quote, fetish, I mean, not quote, hashtag fetish factory. And then there's another one of Gia Drew, with a like, the camera focused right on the crotch area with very, very short denim shorts on that show kind of I think what do they call it? Camel's toe? To, I think, suggest that this person maybe had a vagioplasty, but then also a tattoo of a unicorn, um, that Gia Drew says she loves her so much. Um, you know, I'm all into, like, expressing yourself and being kinky, but the idea that our kids are being represented at the State House by somebody who, in my view, is kind of, like, really sexually kinky and has a fetish about himself, is odd. I don't think I don't think it's a good idea, and I think it should be re reported on, especially because Gia Drew is not correct. This law has not been around for 20 years, and it's not protecting kids. Gender identity law was introduced to the Maine legislature by Gia Drew as part of Equality Maine in 2019, and it was added to Maine law in 2021. And it's this law, gender identity, that has bust open this issue in Maine, and it's what's causes, like, this petition that I'm working on and has caused all of the stories in the newspaper and how it's being cast as somehow anti-trans. The latest effort is just it's not anti-trans. What the proposed legislation does, as I said, was separate facilities on the basis of sex. And trans athletes, so-called, if you believe there is such a thing as a trans kid, I mean, just think about that. What's a trans kid? Is it somebody who A, thinks they were born in the wrong body, or B, was born in the wrong body? Either way, I don't think there's such thing as trans kids. I think there are kids who are confused about gender because they get a lot of mixed messages and they're influenced. There is social contagion. There most certainly is social contagion around this trans issue. And you can see it now, thankfully, studies showing trends. And thankfully, I think, like I said, we might be seeing a break in some of the mania, but we have really been under a spell, and it's in large part because of people like Gia Drew talking about kids who are being discriminated against based on the basis of trans. And that's not that's not the problem here. The problem is women and girls are being discriminated against on the basis of sex because people like Gia Drew can identify as a woman and therefore claim a legal status as a woman. There's no longer protection on the basis of sex. And so you would think that when this sort of thing would happen, right? When all of a sudden we realize, like, wow, the Maine Human Rights Commission really was tricked into, I guess, thinking they were just clarifying the law when they added gender identity, because it doesn't just clarify the law, it totally negates women's rights. It it makes it impossible to protect women and girls on the basis of sex because any guy can just identify as a woman, and because of gender identity laws, we have to accept that he is when we know he isn't. And you would think that the one organization that might know that this gender identity law is really bad for women and and might advocate for its repeal would be the Maine Women's Lobby. But guess what? The Maine Women's Lobby has been captured by gender identity. They went through an overhaul apparently in 2021 and decided to oust the women who were on the board and I guess replace them with people who were going to use the Maine Women's Lobby to feel guilty for all the oppression that the Maine white women have caused. And so as a an antidote to the oppression that white women in Maine have caused, the Maine Women's Lobby was gonna stop focusing on white women and instead focus on queer and trans women. And women who sure, let's protect them too, but in the process, the Maine Women's Lobby has completely abrogated its responsibility to women by denying the reality of the female sex. The Maine Women's Lobby no longer distinguishes women on the basis of sex and is not advocating for women and girls on the basis of sex, and now is taken up this cause to oppose the petition in Maine, suggesting that it discriminates, it bans trans kids from playing on sports teams that match their gender identity. Well, the reality is that gender identity is a feeling that kids have, right? So sex doesn't change. There are 2 sexes, male and female, and yes, there are some interesting, you know, anomalies that we can talk about on another show. But there's 2 sexes and there's XX chromosomes that make up a female and XY that make up a male, and a woman is an adult female human. That's the definition of a woman. A woman is an adult human who's female. So when you start saying that a trans woman is a woman, when Gia Drew, if you start saying Gia Drew is a woman, uh, that's that's false. that that that's false. Gia Drew can identify as a woman, express himself as a woman. Um, Go for it. But we need laws that are factual, and this petition would simply make it clear that there are 2 teams, male and female, and the boys who identify as girls, they can still play, and they play on the team of their biological sex, and there's no discrimination in that. They're getting treated like every other kid. Every other kid is being asked to be on a team that matches their biological sex or be on the co-ed team. That's not discrimination. That's just fair application of reasonable rules. I mean, we don't have 10-year-olds playing with high school seniors, right? There's an age difference in sports. You have, varsity and you have JV. There's a lot of reasons to separate athletes for competition, for fair sport, for competition, for safety, for dignity, for privacy. All of these things are important. So when Gia Drew says, as a man, that we should be worried about the kids. Yeah, we should be worried about the kids. And the people who should be speaking up for kids are not people who have a fetish, about their own sexuality and, not the Maine women's lobby who doesn't believe that women exist. So you know, I'm just telling people that you're gonna hear this nonsense that this petition that's circulating in Maine is about banning and somehow harming trans kids. And I'm here to tell you that there's no such thing as trans kids. There's kids who are confused about their gender, but they all were born with a birth certificate, and on it is their biological sex. And it's not unfair to expect them to be sorted on that basis when it comes to athletics because sports are competitions of bodies. Okay. Sporting matches are not about feelings. And, you can say, oh, this is kids. Yeah, kids, it's competition among kids. And especially in high school and college, women are being denied the opportunity to win races, okay, to get scholarships, to see the fruits of their labor, their training. And if you don't believe me, go to the website hecheated.org, and there you'll find a whole like unbelievable database of all the instances where men and boys have taken away opportunities of women and girls in sports. This is a real issue. It's an important issue. And since we're not getting representation in Maine in the state house, right, we can't count on Equality Maine to stick up for the equal rights of women and girls. No, instead, they're using their efforts, their resources to promote lies that this legislation is somehow unnecessary. No, it is necessary because of the laws that they worked to pass in 2019 and 2021 that has caused this horrible landscape here in the state of Maine. It has been a horrible childhood for Maine kids under the last, administration when it comes to this issue. The legislature has failed Maine's kids, and this is an effort for parents to take it back. We don't want gender identity. We don't want boys playing on the girls' teams. We don't want boys in the girls' locker rooms. I don't want men who pretend to be women to be in the bathroom with me. It used to be that if there was a transsexual, you know, It was no problem because it was somebody who actually went through a process of self-discovery and exploration with the help of medical doctors as adults, arrived at wherever they wanna be, and that's all the power to them. Okay, this is not about that. This is about any man at any time, any boy at any time, based on his feelings, having the right under gender identity laws to enter female spaces and to play on girls and female teams, and we're seeing predators take advantage of these laws over and over again. Of course we are. And people say, "Oh, well, it's the same, you know, it was the same for women too." It's not the same. Okay, it's not the same. Women are not predators, okay? You just look at any statistics. Now they're skewed because so many crimes that have been committed by men who are pretending to be women are now chalked up to be having committed by women when they're not. Women, for the most part, are not big players when it comes to preying on others and sexually exploiting and assaulting others. That's typically the guys. And so that's why it's so dangerous to allow these men and these boys to just somehow have it their way. And somehow the women are just supposed to put up with it. The girls are just supposed to, well, why can't the boys' team accommodate these boys who want to play and dress up as girls? Okay, they can express themselves and play on the boys' team. That's fair. And the kids would get it. The kids would get it. It's the adults. And now let's finally get to my last segment on Santa. Since we talked about Thanksgiving, I made a fabulous grasshopper pie. I'm I can't wait to eat it. It's really, really good. So Thanksgiving is going to be over before you know it. And again, grateful for Riley Gaines, grateful for Leyland Strife and all the volunteers who are working on Protect Girls Sports in Maine. Ungrateful for this conspiracy of nonprofits, and ungrateful for the executive director of Equality Maine, who's I think is 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 failing to represent the interests of children, and is not does not deserve to be a spokesperson for children. Okay, does not have what it takes to be that person speaking up for Maine kids. Okay, it it's not. The Maine Women's Lobby also failing in their mission. They are not the spokesperson for women's rights when it comes to this issue. They have been captured by gender ideology, and they've given up on women and girls. And Planned Parenthood the same way. All of those in that constellation of nonprofits that all for the most part get funded by the same big wealthy Democratic donors. So when you hear this, oh, this petition was funded by out of state dark money. Everything is funded by out of state dark money, including the Alphabet Club advocacy that got all this gender identity nonsense somehow just saturated in our culture. So now on to Christmas, because that's right around the corner. And let's think about Christmas for a minute and the myth of Santa, right? Now, how many children are born knowing about Santa Claus? None, right? None. Santa, the myth of Santa, the folklore, the wonderful just tradition of Santa is something that's passed down from the culture and society, adults to kids. And they believe it. Of course they believe it because everywhere they look, there's Santa, and then there's the stories about Santa, and then of course we leave the cookies out, and then Santa comes. I mean, all the programming, the cultural pressure is intense around Santa. And kids believe in Santa until they don't. And the reason why they believe it is because of, you could say, social contagion, right? I mean, used to be November came around or December. Now it's like in October when we first start hearing the first Christmas carols. The culture just imposes itself on everyone, and everyone is immersed in Santa. And Santa is a myth. Santa, there's no real Santa. There's a lot of people who identify as Santa. There's a lot of people who dress up as Santa. And that's great. And people call them Santa. And maybe deep down they believe they are Santa. But there is no real Santa Claus who lives on the North Pole. That's a myth. And some would say so is trans kids. There's no, like, Kids do not wake up and say, "Oh, I think I was born in the wrong body," and kids were not born in the wrong body. So there's really no such thing as a trans kid. It's a projection that adults put on these poor kids because they might question something about gender. And let's, like, get to the basics. All right, there's two sexes and they can't change. There's male and female. Gender is a social construct. Gender is on a spectrum. You can be non-binary when it comes to gender, meaning you reject gender social like stereotypes. That's what, I've done all like most of my life. It used to be called being a tomboy. Now, under gender ideology, if you reject gender stereotypes, you're supposed to have surgery. These girls are it's recommended to them. Maybe if they're going through angst as a teenager, if they remove their healthy breasts, they're gonna feel better. It's crazy. So there's no such thing as trans kids. Kids were born in the right body, and if they have a belief that they were born in the wrong body, it's because somebody gave them that belief. Just like somebody told them about Santa. It doesn't make it true. And most of them are gonna come around to realizing that it's not true. And we don't have systems in place to detransition these poor kids who have been led down this primrose path by their parents, by their schools, by their schools, by their schools, by their schools, by Planned Parenthood, who does education around this and tells kids gender, there's no such thing as uh, it, you can express your gender until the cows come home. Your sex doesn't change. So we need to tell the kids this truth. We need to base our rules and our laws on this truth. We need to protect people's rights of expression, of course, protect their right to express their gender identity. But that doesn't mean gender identity is protected class and that any boy can be a girl. So, um, you know, trans Santa, come on. I hope you and your family have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And until next time, this is Cynthia Dill signing off. Take care. Oh, I need to do my outro.